This video I'm going to explore the key differences between the Blazor server and Blazor WebAssembly interactive render mode hosting models. So the first thing that I'm going to do is open up Chrome and then go up and over to click on the AI mode button to the right. Then I will type Blazor server versus WebAssembly and press the enter key, and the AI will render a response starting with some key differences between the two. The AI suggests that the main question one should ask is where do they want the code to run, on an internet server or directly in the user's browser. Next, it will show some key differences between server and WebAssembly, starting with the execution, which on server the UI will update over the internet using Signal R while the WebAssembly runs in the browser. So what that means is since everything runs on the browser for WebAssembly, the initial load for it will be slower than it would be for server, since it has to download everything the app needs to function properly. And that brings up offline support, which is not possible for server since it depends on a host to update. So if you need your app to work when there is no internet, WebAssembly will be required. Resources is another key difference between server and WebAssembly, in that server uses more compute on the internet server, and WebAssembly would shift that workload to the device being used. Apps using server are generally considered more secure than WebAssembly because they keep code, logic, and sensitive data securely on the server, whereas WebAssembly downloads everything to the client's browser. And finally, WebAssembly is considered more scalable than server because it adopts a decentralized client-side execution model, whereas server relies on more of a stateful server-side execution. The AI response goes on to explain how both work, what they are best for, and the pros and cons of each option. And it ends with an explanation about interactive auto that started with .NET version 8, which uses server for a fast initial load while downloading the WebAssembly bundle in the background. So before I show how to set up a site for each model in Visual Studio, I'm going to open up Chrome again and type the learn.microsoft.com web address in the omnibox and press enter. Then after that website loads, I'll go down to click on documentation and then down to click on all product documentation. Now I will scroll down, and what I'm looking for next is the ASP.NET Core product, so I will click on that and then go over and click on the overview option in the middle of the page. And here is where you can learn pretty much anything you want to know about ASP.NET Core, including the Blazor feature, which is located under the Web Apps option. So I will go down and click on Blazor to expand the documentation for it, then click on Components and then scroll down again and click on Render Modes. Here this article will have extensive information about this topic, starting with an explanation about how WebAssembly apps only render on the client, so they really don't have a concept of a render mode. Then it goes on to explain how every component in a Blazor web app adopts a render mode to determine the hosting model it uses, where it's rendered, and whether or not it's interactive. Next, the article has a table that shows the available render modes for rendering components and how to apply them throughout your web app, which I will show how to do later in the video. Then the article goes on to explain render modes in greater detail, along with showing examples on how to apply and use it in certain scenarios. It also explains how to pre-render page content statically from the server to improve the initial load experience, and how to detect rendering location, interactivity, and assign render mode at runtime. This article covers a lot of information about render modes, which would make this a really long video if I covered it all, so I will just link to this documentation in the description. It closes with additional resources, including some training modules, and it shows the article was last updated on December 12th of 2025, so some of this information may change as time goes on. So next I'm going to create a new project for server and a new project for WebAssembly so I can show the difference between the two sample pages for each side by side. So starting with server, I will double click on the Visual Studio 2026 desktop icon to launch it, and then go over to click on the Create a New Project button. Next, I will select the Blazor web app option, and then go down to click Next. Then from here, I'll replace Blazor with server in the project name. Right-click to copy the repo location and go down to click Next again. Now for the framework, I'm going to keep it set at .NET 10 with long-term support, but for interactive render mode, this is where I will select the server option. Interactivity location chooses which components will have interactive rendering enabled, and the options are global, which sets it the same for the whole app, or per page or component, which is what I want. The sample pages will help to show the difference between server and WebAssembly, so I will leave the Include Sample Pages option selected, and then go down to click the Create button. Then after Visual Studio creates the server project, I will drag the window over to the left and minimize it so I can create the WebAssembly project to compare the two side by side. So I will select the Blazor web app under Recent Project Templates and click Next, replace Blazor with WASM in the project name, and then go down to click the Next button again. But this time for interactive render mode, I'm going to select the WebAssembly option and then go down and click the Create button. Visual Studio will create the WebAssembly project, and after it is done, this time I will drag the window to the right and then select the server project to snap the two windows together side by side. And the first thing that should become apparent is that the WebAssembly project appears to separate the client side from the server side. So I will expand the components for the server web app on the left and then go over and do the same for the server side of the WebAssembly app on the right to see the differences between the two. The server web app has a reconnect modal layout and a counter page which do not appear in the server side of the WebAssembly app. And the reason server has a reconnect modal is because it is like a remote controlled car that stops if it loses the radio signal, so losing an internet connection triggers the reconnect layout component. The WebAssembly app would not need that because it downloads everything to work offline, so it doesn't matter if it loses internet after the download completes. And for WebAssembly, there is a separate client project that has the counter page in it, which is where you will want to add all your components that you want to be downloaded to the user's device. You can see the WebAssembly page has the render mode up top of the page set to interactive WebAssembly, while the counter page on the server has the render mode set to interactive server. Now I left the configure for HTTPS checked to show how that works. It will provide the option to start the project with it, but I don't need to, so I will click the down arrow and switch it to HTTP and start it that way. Then after the project starts in the browser, a good way to better learn how the sample files work is to go up to the 3 vertical dots in the corner of Chrome, go down to hover over More Tools, and then click Developer Tools. And now you can see what is going on to the right as you explore the web app for either the server project or start an HTTP endpoint to explore how the WebAssembly project works as well. Hopefully this video has helped, and feel free to ask any questions that you still may have in the comments. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe for more quick and on-point videos.